let them document the fact that they have mastered that, and then let them use that time while other children are learning the basic material to go on and do some advanced material. So we use this chart to do it, name it, what is the material to be covered, prove it, how do you document that the student has mastered these skills, and then finally, what are some things that we could substitute for those young people that is more interesting to them, even if it's right within the same subject matter. The biggest problem that we run into in our country with high ability students is boredom. They are bored because they're covering material that is below their level and that is unchallenging. One other component of our work is what we call enrichment clusters, where we create a time and a space in the school week where the kind of learning that I'm talking about, investigative learning, is the main event. It's non-graded groups of children who come together because of a common interest to pursue the development of a product or service. The golden rule: all activity is directed toward the production of a product or service or performance. Notice what I said earlier in type 3 about the importance of outlet and audience and impact. So they're doing it because it's knowledge, creativity, going someplace to make something happen. Students and teachers select the clusters that they're in. We use their profiles to help them make a decision about what clusters they want to be in. We group students across grade level. We find that age is imperceptible because of the commonality of interests. And here's the hard part for a lot of teachers. There are no predetermined unit or lesson plans. Now, there are roles that teachers fulfill. We call it the guide on the side, but they don't write lesson or unit plans, because once they do, they're back to deductive, didactic, prescriptive. There's a couple more. The authentic methods of professionals are used. Here's where the how-to books come in. Here's where the data gathering instruments come in. Divisions of labor are used so that children with different strengths, if we're making films, for example, we've got actors, we've got directors, we've got costume, we've got makeup, we've got scenery people, everybody working together. Specially designated time blocks are set aside for this, and I'm going to go on very quickly. These are the questions that we build the clusters around. What do people with an interest in this area, let's say filmmaking, do? Not what do they learn, what do they do? What products do they create? What methods do they use? What resources and materials do they need? How and with whom do they communicate the results of their work? Okay, we are moving along. I'm going to give you just very quickly, you're going to get mad at me for doing this, but I'm going to just run through some titles of enrichment clusters to show you the many different areas in which we make them available. I got to click on here. This is in literature, language arts, and the humanities, physical and life sciences, the arts. These are all actual clusters that have been developed in one school or another that I've worked in. Social studies, social sciences, mathematics, computers, physical education, industrial arts, and home economics, and that's the end of that. We're almost done. Now we're going to take a quick look at the Renzulli learning system. First of all, I just want to point out that this system provides lots and lots of data for decision-making in your school. This is a profile of 306 schools in the city of Houston, Texas. You can get the same profile for one single individual classroom, or for all of the third grades in your building, or for your entire school authority or your entire school district. And notice here, we see that technology and games and independent study are, and group work are among the highest, and lecture is the lowest area of students' preferred learning styles. And so maybe we're lecturing a little bit too much. Now, we've spent hundreds of thousands of hours gathering resources and placing them into various databases that correlate with the triad model. So here, for example, virtual field trips, very good for type 1, for getting kids interested. Isn't it interesting? I can go home to Connecticut, 3,000 or 4,000 miles, and I can go to a school nearby, and with the right virtual field trip, I could take some of my school children to Petra. And if they got interested, they could then maybe want to do a research project on Petra, study the history of it. We have things on type 2, critical thinking, creative thinking. Many of these are activities that you can print out. We see here fiction, nonfiction, and then our how-to books as databases. So it's all correlated with the triad model. Everything is tagged. It's tagged by interest areas, it's tagged by learning styles, it's also tagged by grade level and level of reading difficulty. I'm going to, because of time, I'm going to skip along here. Now, here's an example. This is a teacher that is studying the topic of climate change. And there are lots and lots of resources in climate change for these young people. Oh, there we see them all coming on the screen. Many, many, many different resources. Now, what the matching process does is, by looking, the computer looks at each student's profile, and then basically what it does is, it places these in the youngster's repertoire based on their profile. Now, you can search in many different ways. For example, in mathematics, you can look at all different subtopics, fractions, geometry, estimation, measurement, and things like that. Now, this next one is really probably one of the best uses of the program. Here we see at the top of the page 3 different sites that the teacher wants all children to study. At the bottom of the page, we see some sites, like the ones that you just saw going into those children's heads, that are based on their own individual interests within the topic of climate change. So here we see, again, I'll put them all on just to save time. The teacher can send the same required 3 or 4 sites that she wants them to visit, but then the computer will also individually select sites for different children. And so we are getting here the best of the teacher's goals and also the personalization that we're trying to achieve. Now, 1 or 2 final points on an individual basis. This is a young man named Franklin, and his primary interest is in technology and reading and learning games. And what the computer did was find for Franklin a game called Escape to Freedom. It's a game about slavery in America, and it's a critical thinking logistics game where if you play the game correctly, your slave will escape from a slave state to a free state. Franklin was also, this is all related to a teacher's unit on the Civil War in America. Franklin was also interested in things, and he went online and found that there is actual recordings that have been saved by the Library of Congress of interviews with ex-slaves, and so he also studied that as part of his work. So how do we develop giftedness? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I think we develop it with three things. One is opportunities. The second is resources. The third is encouragement, but always within the area of the child's interests. And so while there are must-dos, there are ministry-based curriculum that young people must learn, we also believe that we need to give them an opportunity to learn and things that which they have an interest in their own way, and that's what our work has been all about. This is a summary of the school-wide enrichment model, the theorists and researchers that the work is based on, the major goals of the model, the organizational components that I went over with you, and then the service delivery components. Now, you might say, well, how are we going to do all of this? Glad you asked that question. You need to sort of sit there and study what the nature of the problem is, and then you need to put your heads together and decide what resources you have and how you want to plan, and then you can solve the problem. I think that this work is nothing more than organized common sense. It's the way that learning would and should take place if we haven't over-formalized it with too much prescribed, required curriculum. And it's also the kind of learning that I think will produce exactly the kinds of people that Her Royal Highness mentioned that make it so important for the future of your culture and your economy and your country. I appreciate your kind attention, and I thank you very much for listening. You have to turn that mic back on. I just clicked it off.
كل الشكر للبروفيسور جوزيف رنزولي على هذه الرحلة المذهلة في التعليم. قدم نموذجا متكاملا في تقديم التعليم بوجهه المتميز. ما بقي أمامنا إلا أن نحلق مع أطفالنا في عالم الإبداع، لأنه الحل الوحيد كي يواجهوا تحديات المستقبل. شكرا لحسن إصغائكم. يسعدنا أن يقدم المركز الدولي لتطوير التعليم درع تكريمي للبروفيسور جوزيف رنزولي. وشكرا.
Thank you. Whoops. Thank you very much. Thank you.